Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. Today's title of the show is In Charge of Me, helping seniors be where they want to be. And our guest today is Cindy Brown, who's a licensed social worker, certified dementia practitioner, training and resource manager at Home Instead Senior Care. It's quite a mouthful, but Cindy, thanks for being our guest today.
My pleasure.
I think one of the things we were talking about today, and we're going to talk about seniors remaining in their home, making their decisions, and being in control of their own lives. And Cindy, this is the Department of Senior Affairs. That's why we wanted to have you on. You did a presentation, I believe, at North Valley about 2 weeks ago, I think. And so when I saw this, that's how I get a lot of titles for the shows I want to do. Is I'll go through the catalog and I'll say, oh, that's something I think seniors would want to know. Well, the people that we deal with are elderly. Our department's amazing. They do so many services for so many people that I'm so proud to be an employee of the department because, I told you I got an 88-year-old mother. And so those are the things we're going to talk about today. And, the first question we want to lead off with, and, you're going to be talking about how to empower the senior to stay at home, safety, resources, home modifications, which our department does some of that, advanced planning, stay in control even if they become unable to state their wishes and make decisions for themselves. Man, that is just so important. Cindy, what are the most common reasons a senior would have to leave their home? What are some of the common reasons of that?
Typically, the most common reasons is a safety reason, whether it's because there's cognitive impairment, there's some level of dementia, but safety is usually the key. And whether it's physical safety or cognitive safety, usually what ends up is they get into situations where they cannot maintain their safety. And so typically their family members, or sometimes even Adult Protective Services, has to move in and protect the safety for that senior themselves. The biggest reason why that seniors end up leaving their home more than anything is a lack of planning, because we think things are going to just kind of stay the same. And we think about the fact that we kind of decide that our aging process is going to be like the people who came before us. And so we forget that we're living longer and our bodies are older and more things happen than necessarily happened to the people who came before us. So we don't always plan for what can happen. And it's the crisis that typically will bring somebody out of their home.
I'm going to ask you this. I don't know if there's a percentage on this or not, but I would gather that, the planning part. I mean, I think I've seen, there's a senior at our center, and the guy was, he was the man. He was the man, and he has some, he has a what's that word, disease, Parkinson's disease.
Ooh.
And, and the thing is, I've seen him, he's been at North Valley since the center opened, it seems. I've only been the manager there for 3 years, but for years. And it's hard to see him go down. It's hard. It's hard to see that. It's happening before our eyes. But the planning part, I think a lot of people just don't see for tomorrow. In other words, I don't know that he planned, or I hope he did, but the planning part is a lot of pride involved there, because you don't see yourself. I'm 51 now. I still see myself as 31. I'm not. I like to do some athletics still. I like to play basketball. My knees aren't what they used to be. So I think a lot of pride gets in the way, things like that. What gets in the way of doing these kind of planning, because it's important, but what would get, you almost have to get yourself out of the way in some situations because you don't see yourself as you really are.
Absolutely. And I think pride is definitely a part of it, but the other part of it is that it's very hard for us to anticipate our own aging. It's very difficult for us we spend our whole lives kicking and scratching to become an adult. Then once we become an adult, we're very accustomed to being in control, and we're very accustomed to being able to respond to whatever situation life throws us. The challenge is, as we get older, it's not that we don't continue to know what to do, but all too often it's that we can't do it, either physically or cognitively. We can no longer respond to those crises. So for somebody who is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, you don't know where that's eventually going to take you. You know where that medicine says the disease will take you. But when you get hit with that kind of diagnoses, sometimes it's really, really hard to say, okay, I need to plan my home, I need to plan my life and my activities, my resources for a progressive, debilitating disease, when you're just saying, no, no matter what comes my way, I'll handle it. I've handled everything that's come my way so far, I'll just handle it. And people don't always realize that with a little bit of planning, a little bit of preparation, you can protect your ability to maintain your control. And that's what all seniors want. That's the most important thing.
No question about it.
They don't want it any less than we want it at 51.
Right. And I think that's an important. I think the other thing too, Cindy, is when you have sicknesses or whatever it is, medications might also cause side effects that may not make you think clearly. And the other thing is that are you having someone in the home or a loved one help you make these decisions? Some seniors, we take it for granted that everybody has somebody. They don't. So what does that come into play as far as planning and looking ahead? And there are resources out there for seniors to access.
Absolutely. The Senior Citizens Law Office is a great place to start. There are also case managers. There's case manager programs even through the city of Albuquerque, through the Department of Senior Affairs, that can help seniors who don't necessarily have the right person to help them make their decisions. I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is sometimes the person that helps us make decisions or that we entrust with being our voice when we can no longer be our own voice, sometimes the natural selection, your kid, is not always the best choice. And sometimes it's hard for seniors to see that too, because we want to think the best of people that love us and that we love. So
Boy,
sometimes it's not the kids.
Yeah, and in most cases, we would hope that it is, because you like you said, you are trusting people to very serious matters, financial, medical. There's so many things, that you're entrusting people to, and some people just lack those skills. Honest to God, that's what it comes down to. They lack those responsible skills to make sure everything is taken care of.
Sometimes it's a matter of lacking those skills. The other thing is part of your mom trusting you with her decision making and her voice is that you guys have talked about what she wants. A lot of times it's hard for seniors to tell their family members, if this happens to me, if I'm no longer able to make these decisions, or if I'm no longer able to do this, this is what I want to happen. Those are really hard decisions to have and hard discussions to have once you've made those decisions. And so if you decide, okay, I'm going to appoint this person as my decision maker, but you don't give them very clear guidance and very clear expectations for what you want, then a lot of times people really flounder because they're trying to make decisions based on information that they really don't have.
So again, part of the planning, part of the whole planning, communicating,
Exactly.
writing, orally. And then, again, some people still don't, they still don't understand, but those are things that I think would help as far as the planning process that you're talking about.
Early on, start having those discussions so that when a crisis happens, I think one of the biggest things that happened with me and my mom is I talked to her a lot about what would you want if this happens, because she has some health problems. They're pretty significant. Some of her choices I don't necessarily agree with, but it's not my decision whether I agree or disagree with her choices, because that's not the instruction she's giving me. The instruction she's giving me is, if I can no longer tell people this is what I want, this is what I want. So I have to be willing to accept to be her voice, even if I don't agree with her choice. So accepting that responsibility to be somebody's power of attorney or be somebody's caregiver, it comes with so many dynamics and so many details that can be really scary unless you've talked about it for a long time ahead of time.
And I think the other thing is too, is your mother was able to communicate. So was, my mother is, I told you that, but there's other people who can't. So that's another thing, that's another variable, that you have to throw into in some cases as well, I'm sure.
Well, it's hard when you're 30 years old to say to your mom, hey mom, what would you want to have happen if you were no longer able to feed yourself and you could no longer eat and drink by yourself? Because when you're 30 is when you want to have that discussion with your mom, when she's still capable of giving you that information and giving you her perspective and insight. And that's not a discussion that you want to have when you're young.
Well, I think like we said, you never see your parents aging. I never did, ever, until, certain things happen and there wasn't anything we could do as staring us in the face, so we had to have those conversations. So, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to have those talks, but you're right.
Mom is always mom.
Or dad is dad. Usually in a lot of cases they're the most important people in your life. So that's important, though. You're right to have those conversations while they still can. The second question, or what are the most important things a senior can do to help ensure that they are able to stay at home? This is a very key question here, because I'm sure you're going to go through a lot of things that they need to look at.
I think the biggest thing that a person needs to do is try to look objectively at what they want. I've had plenty of seniors tell me, I want to stay right here in this house. This is more important to me than anything. If that is what's more important to you than anything, then you need to make sure that house is ready for you. Not necessarily that the house has to be, these huge remodels. Sometimes it's as simple as making sure that the house is still maintained appropriately so that the plumbing works, the infrastructure is safe, the floors are safe, that as a person is aging, when it comes time to look at changing the flooring, if you're changing the flooring when you're 60, think about what you're going to need in 10 years and in 20 years, and think about how you're going to change that flooring. Think about when you look at your bathroom. When you've got a plumbing problem and you're bringing a plumber in, is this now the time that you need to buy one of the handicapped height toilets instead of just repairing the old one? Sometimes it's those simple little things that you do, because really and truly, for somebody to stay in their home when they are aging, the devil is in the details. Sometimes it's the little things, an extra inch on that toilet, a floor that someone can safely navigate, somebody, making a change and putting in appropriate countertops and changing the levels and the access to things. Sometimes those are the key things, particularly when somebody ends up with having to use walkers or wheelchairs or having major fall issues like with Parkinson's or a stroke. Those are safety things. The other thing is the key again is the planning, is what are the resources that are available to me to help me stay in my home? Sometimes it's as simple as knowing who has the most cost-effective I've fallen and I can't get up button, because those can help seniors stay in their homes as well. It's knowing what resources are out there, and it's knowing that I have the basics covered, because all too often we don't think about the basics until we're laying in a hospital bed, and that's when it's too late.
And again, you're talking about pre-planning and things like that. I think the flooring, and I'm thinking about that, and at 60, you're still thinking you're 40 probably or 50, but you're headed towards 70 and 80, and I think that's important, because you mentioned the falling and the walkers and the things that you might need as you age, and my mother was able to stay in her home till 87, which
It's amazing.
was pretty good. It just got to the point where we couldn't have her there anymore. But safety, you talked about safety, and she had some fall issues, and we just couldn't do that. But I think one of the things that you mentioned is, the devil's in the details, and it may seem, like a small point, but those are huge. They turn into big things: the countertops, accessibility to food, to basic needs, human needs, and a lot of people wouldn't think that. And would they see that though? A lot of people wouldn't see themselves. Look in the mirror. They always say that. That everyone gets, like you said, that people are living longer lives. Those important details like that are so important if you want to stay in your home, and mostly everybody does.
It's interesting because I have worked with seniors in nursing homes, hospital, assisted living, adult daycare, and now home care. And my consistent question over the years has been, tell me what is the biggest concern that you have? What is the biggest fear or the worst thing that you can see happening to yourself for the rest of your life? It is not dying. It is not being incapacitated. It is not being lonely. It is not their spouse leaving them. It is having to lose control and having to leave their home. That is truly the most consistent fear that seniors communicate to me. So what I like to do is, when I'm working with seniors, if we're lucky enough to get them involved in their thinking process about their future before the crisis hits, is what are some basic details to put in place a basic safety net? Who is your support group? What resources are available to you? What are your resources, and how do you need to use them the most? I've had plenty of people say to me in the past, I will spend every last resource, every penny I have to stay in my home. And I want to stay here till the absolute last moment. And other people are like, you know what, I want to make sure that my money lasts until I die. I want to leave something. So it's very individual, and it requires discussion. Because sometimes it is a matter of, it's time. I think one of the things that happens is when we don't have many choices, and that happens with crisis, because when crisis occurs, you lose choices. When you make decisions before the crisis, you have more options. I have a dear friend of mine who's probably 22 years older than me. She is looking at whether or not she wants to stay in her home. She's in her mid-60s. Does she want to stay in her home until she's older, or does she want to move through a continuum of care? She's thinking at some of these senior living places where there's people her own age, there's activities, there's housekeeping, there's meals, there's all this good stuff. She's saying, you know, that does have some appeal. So she's asking herself those questions already before she has that need so that she can be more in control of what choices she makes.
Yeah, it's probably unusual. A lot of people probably don't think ahead like that. She's in her mid-60s, and in our department, a lot of people would say that's very young still, and
of course it is.
And it is, but
it is.
She's thinking ahead, and I'm thinking if I always say that, I hope to make it to 65, or there's no guarantees for anyone.
You
but,
hope to retire,
right? Sure, but I don't know that I would be thinking that. But maybe by you saying that, that would make me kind of think about that. For my wife and I, you never know. The choices we'll have to make when we're in our home with.
Ed, when you're 40s, you're planning for your retirement, right?
Yes.
Well, when you hit retirement, what are you going to plan for then?
Right.
You still got to be planning for the next decades. And sometimes when you start having those kinds of thoughts and you start mulling over some of those issues, you discover that there are way more options and way more choices available to you if you make those choices before you're in a hospital bed.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's why the topic of this show is why we're doing, In Charge of Me. Hopefully people are going to get some thought process and do some critical thinking, because that's what needs to be done. No question about it. The other question, Cindy, is how do seniors protect their decision making and voice? And we talked about that if they become unable to speak for themselves, which is, we just talked about that. What do they do there?
Absolutely. The most important thing that they can do is execute the legal documents like powers of attorney, living will, trust, whatever those legal documents are that is going to empower the people that they trust to be their voice. And absolutely the best way to do that is to seek legal assistance from the Senior Citizens Law Office or an elder law attorney, not just any attorney, but someone who is skilled and dedicated to helping seniors maintain their independence. All too often I see powers of attorney that folks have downloaded off the internet. While that's something, it truly is not the absolute best. That's why I point people towards the Senior Citizens Law Office every chance I get. Because if you have legal assistance in executing those documents, in making those decisions, then what you have done is you have ensured much more capably your decision making and your control in the future. Because if you don't have the legal backup that you need
For sure.
to do what you want to do for your mom, you can't do what you need to do for her. So I encourage people, always go to an elder law attorney, go to a specialist. You are not going to ask the plumber to fix the transmission in your car. So you want to make sure you have a specialist helping you with your legal issues for your future.
Well, I just got to say, for my point, we had to make some medical decisions on my mother, and it was always said that I was a power of attorney. We had to go to an attorney's office and get all that.
Yes.
Those documents are so important, because it can't be just a designated, I'm pointing at you, you're the power of attorney.
Right.
They want to see documentation. They want to see, embossed by a lawyer. They
Yep.
want to see that. So I can't say how important that is, me being my mother's executor, the power of attorney. Those things are very important. Anything that I even want to talk to people about, well, fax your power of attorney.
Right.
They're not going to just take it over the phone
Nope.
or your email. They're not going to take your word. They need to know and they need to see it.
I encourage families to do two things. First of all, absolutely make sure that the person who holds your power of attorney has multiple copies, because if you end up in the ER and they're going to have to try to pull it out of an old record from a previous stay, it is so much more effective when you can whip a copy right out of your back pocket and say, I am my mother's power of attorney, here is the paperwork. The other thing that happens is when you hold in your hand that proof, that document, if there's any discord among family, and when we love people, we get excited about things. And families have dynamics, and it's not because we don't love people or we don't care about people, but because we care passionately. So when crisis happens and you're standing in the ER, or there has to be a serious decision made, sometimes the person holding the paper is the person who can be empowered to make those decisions. So having that document in your hand and having multiple copies available to you whenever you need them, truly, the paper is worthless if you don't have it when you need it. And I tell people to carry copies in their vehicle so that when something happens, all they got to do is pull it out of the glove box.
Yeah, and you know what? I think in dealing with an elderly parents or elderly, you never know when that's going to happen.
That's right.
You know, you're right. That's absolutely essential, crucial, because they're going to ask for that, and they're not going to take your word. They want to see it,
That's right.
and that's the law.
That's right.
the law. So I think that's an important point as well. You know, Cindy, what is one of the biggest fears seniors have?
Losing control. Not just losing control of their world, because the world is changing so drastically that seniors are still kind of looking around going, whoa, what's going on? But losing the ability to be in control and live their life the way they want it. And when you think about it, we spend so much of our lifetime deciding who we are. And just because we're 80 or 90 or 70 doesn't mean that we still aren't dedicated to who we are. So I think that seniors worry most about losing the ability to be who they are, losing control. And I think that when we talk about these kinds of things before the crisis hits, that it gives people the opportunity to communicate what is important to me, what means the most to me, and how is your role in my life going to help me maintain my control? Because that's what seniors fear the most. Let's face it, that's what we fear the most.
Well, now that you're mentioning it, Cindy, you know, of course, you're thinking, I'm thinking down the way, 25 years, but yeah, I think we all fear that, and I think one of the things that for my mother, when we sold the house, I thought, gosh, I was kind of worried about the impact. It was the loss, like you said, of pride, what belonged to her, to the family. But she recovered pretty quick about that. She understood. She understood the situation. Thank God her mind is still strong as ever at 88 as it was at 28. Honest to God, she can recall things that when she was 5 years old, that just, her mind has always been like that.
She's not going to forget what you did either, is she?
No, she won't. It's funny, even to this day, if I come in with a long face to this day, what's wrong? It still's got that mother's intuition that something's up, and, I don't know where she gets it, but thank God the mind is still strong. But I think the fears that you talked about are real. There's no question. You feel the fear of losing your home, the fear of losing what you said is your persona. Who are you? It's still important, very important. That doesn't go away just because you're 98
Absolutely
or
not.
105 or, and yeah, it's funny. I saw in the obituaries, I think it was 2 days ago, two ladies died that were 101, and I'm like, wow, you see one, but like you said, people are living longer. They're living longer lives, and I think you're right. It doesn't matter what age you are. You're still, I see that every single day.
Seniors.
Every day. Got a 98-year-old lady, and gosh, she's still upright and amazing, ornery, and she'll tell me, every day, how are you, honey? Well, I'm not so good today. I just let her rant. Whatever she wants to talk about is fine. She's earned that. And she'll tell me exactly what she feels, that, she's hurting or someone didn't come pull the weeds or, but she's still there every day. So she comes for something, socialization, meals, like I said, our department's
Somebody to complain to.
Oh, I love it though. It's part of my job. It's, I'm the complaint department. I'm the chief complaint guy. That's the way it is. I don't mind,
One of the best parts of my job, and has always been when I'm working with seniors, is sitting down in front of a senior and looking at them and saying, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your life. Because when you do that, you hear about these amazing stories, but it gives you this great window into how they perceive themselves and what's important to them. And the same things that are important to you and I are the same things that they tell us about. They tell us about their work, their family, their hobbies, where they came from, where they see themselves heading. It's the exact same conversation that we have with one another at this age, just with a whole lot more information.
Boy, so much experience, so much life's experiences, and whatever reason, there's been a disconnect between today's youth and I don't know. I always said that you can always learn from older people. I learned something from my mother and the people that I work with every single day, every day. Something. I love them. I love them to death. I love our all our clientele because I hope that we make a difference in someone's life. I hope that at least once a day, once a week, 50 times a month, and I think we do.
There's
I
no
know
doubt
we
about
do.
it.
And that's important to us. It's very important. You know, we got about 2 minutes left here, and I want to get to this last question. Where do seniors end up living if they do have to leave their home? Where do they end up living? Like my mother, St. Mary's Assisted Living.
Right. And that's what happens. A lot of times I think seniors and their family members kind of have in their mind this picture of the old folks' home. There are so many more choices available. Yes, you can move in with a family member, but there are nursing homes and old folks' homes. But there are so many levels of places where people can live in between. There's assisted living. There's apartments and communities that aren't necessarily assisted living but are supported living. There are so many options and so many choices that people aren't aware of. And when I'm able to sit down with seniors and say, these are choices that are open to you, it's not just here or the nursing home. You give people so much sense of control and so much relief when they realize that there are choices in between what they consider the worst possible thing happening.
I think that's important, and we got about a minute, but I think that's important because you just mentioned old folks' home, and the perception is not what it used to be.
Absolutely.
Some of these homes are, my mother's been in 2 of them,
Amazing.
and I've been very, very pleased with both of them. Of course, we'd rather have her at our home or at her home. Reality is that can't happen.
Right.
But my brother, my sister, and I are very cognitive of what goes on, making sure, hey, this is what's going on with my mom. I mean, we're present. We let them know if something's not going right. She's paying money for that. And the 2 facilities she's been at, we don't have anything to say except great things. So, although again, we'd rather be, the situation be different. It isn't. That's reality. So there are some good places.
There are
Right.
many wonderful places.
Right. Anything else? Last parting shot, Cindy. I'll give it to one last parting shot, and we'll wrap it up here.
Just ask the hard questions and listen carefully. That's the most important thing we can do for our seniors.
Well, I think that's something we try to do every day, and you're absolutely right about that. Cindy Brown, licensed social worker, certified dementia practitioner, training and resource manager at Home Instead Senior Care. Thanks so much for being our guest.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you, Ed.
Really enjoyed it. For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.